Hello, and welcome back. We'll be checking out the special metal gallium today, here on the Jasa channel. And so I'll be using 16 millimeter borosilicate tubing for today's project. I chose it because it's an extra thin tube, just a little over a millimeter in wall thickness. This thinner wall should help transfer heat into the tubing a little more quickly, especially when you're holding it, which is important because gallium melts in your hands. It has an incredibly low melting point, only 86 degrees. And so since the human body is roughly around 98.6, I should be able to melt it with just body heat. So I'll experiment with that later in the video. I'm rotating and gathering up the glass at the end of the tubing into a nice solid gather. This should give me plenty of material to blow out into a nice sphere. As I bring it out of the flame, I wait for a few seconds before I puff into it. That gives it a moment for the heat to balance through the gather. That way when I puff into it, it puffs out evenly all the way around. And now I'll go back into the flame and melt it back down just a little bit to help even out that wall thickness. Then I'll come out of the flame and give it just that moment there and start to puff into it to push the air pocket deeper into that gather. Using this extra thin tube is a little bit difficult for this process, as it's going to take more time to gather up the glass, and there's less stability from the tube holding onto the gather. I could connect a blow tube up to a larger piece of glass, like a 26 mil, but doing it this way should give me a nice clean neck, a good connection between the sphere and the tube. And so originally I was planning to take this experiment a little bit further. I wanted to focus more on thermodynamics and incorporate something very thermally conductive like silver. Silver is incredibly thermally conductive, somewhere in the range of 300 to 400 times more than glass. And so I thought maybe if I put a silver coil on the inside, it would conduct the heat more quickly from my hand. However, gallium is pretty reactive to other metals when in its liquid state. It will dissolve aluminum at room temperature. And so the coil inside might erode over time. But this design should be a little interesting itself. My hypothesis is that one side of the vessel might melt the gallium more quickly than the other. I believe the spherical orb should allow more surface area of contact, whereas the cylinder side is going to have more gallium concentrated into the center of it, so it should take a bit longer. I'm also trying to blow the orb out very thin, enough to match the tube. It can be a little difficult to tell how thick the walls are of a hollow section of tubing. You just kind of have to look through the wall and judge how much light is being bent or refracted. But now I think this is looking large enough. I'm going to give it one last finishing puff and then use my claw grabbers to take it off the rest of the tube. It's good to warm these up a little bit in the back of the flame, just so that doesn't shock your work And so someone left a good question on the bubble level video. How would you go about closing a vessel like the bubble level, or maybe one like this? And it can actually be a bit of a hard process. I normally recommend not to close up any hollow glass containers, any vessels. As the air inside begins to heat or cool, it will begin to expand or contract. So as the air heats up and expands, it begins to push itself out of the vessel. Once you close it up and the air cools down again, it will become negatively pressured. And so I was recommending that you might want to swipe some molten glass over the hole while the vessel is still cool. But then it will heat the air inside a little bit, which might pop out another hole. So you might need to heat the hole just a little bit before you add the glass, and then that slight negative pressure might help pull it inward. I'll admit I'm still experimenting with closing vessels. I really haven't found the best technique yet. But of course, the one thing that I'm very certain of is that you don't want to put them in the kiln or attempt to run an annealing cycle if they're closed, as that could cause them to explode. But now I'm just flaring open the end of this tube to help pour the gallium in. I'll melt the gallium in the plastic container using hot water. I'll set it in the decorative jar I made at the beginning of the year. It took a little bit of time to melt, but now it's ready to be poured into the vessel. And it's actually staining the glass a little more than I expected. It has a pretty cool metallic shine, but it doesn't look like it's coming off the walls. It might end up turning the entire thing into a mirror. And now for the difficult part of closing it up. I'll start by going around and shrinking this hole down to a smaller size. And now that I've gotten the hole down to about a millimeter or two, about the size of a thumbtack, I'll try to melt a separate glass rod and close up the hole. I don't know if you're as nervous as I am here. This reminds me too much of the Stormglass episode. But you have to make mistakes sometimes to figure out what not to do. It is truly a learning experience. You know, if you show me someone who's never made a mistake, I'll be able to show you someone who's never learned their lesson. And so I put it in the refrigerator upright so it would solidify in the orb. I'm going to go ahead and hold on to it and turn it upside down and see if I can melt it with body heat. So I thought this would take a really long time, but after about 5 or 6 minutes, it was turning liquid. And so it's working. The glass Gallium Gizmo is a success. And now we've reached the end of the video. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up next. And I want to thank you for tuning in here on the Matt Jasa channel.